The frosted glass walls of Robert Sterling's office felt colder than usual that Tuesday afternoon. He didn't stand, didn't offer a handshake, just gestured to the chair opposite his imposing desk. My stomach churned, a low hum of dread, but my face stayed neutral. I'd been with Hartwell for 22 years, and I knew this meeting wasn't about a promotion. And then he said it. "Michael," he began, his voice flat, devoid of warmth, "we're restructuring the engineering division. Your position is being eliminated, effective 30 days from now." I just sat there, processing. My mind was already racing, calculating, not reacting. Years of engineering had taught me that the first response is rarely the best. Collect data first. Always. Robert took my silence as an invitation to drone on, detailing his severance package, COBRA, market conditions. It was all noise. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "Look, Michael, I understand you're close to pension vesting. Unfortunately, the restructuring timeline doesn't accommodate individual circumstances. It's just business. Don't take it personally. Just business. Don't take it personally." Those words, they clawed at me. Two phrases that always mean the exact opposite of what they claim. I nodded slowly. Just business. Exactly, he looked relieved, actually surprised I wasn't fighting him. I smiled. A quiet, knowing smile he clearly didn't understand. And then I stood up, shook his outstretched hand firmly, and simply said, "Okay." No argument. No threats. No outburst. Just acceptance. Because the truth was, I wasn't accepting. I was planning. Because what he, and his private equity bosses, had forgotten was one very critical, very expensive detail about their best-selling product. A detail I'd spent 15 years quietly ensuring would always be mine. I walked out of that office, keeping my pace steady. Didn't hurry. Didn't hesitate. Collected my personal items from my desk while my coworkers watched with that awkward sympathy people show when they're relieved it wasn't them. Daniel, from my engineering team, stopped by. His face was pale. "Michael, I just heard. This is insane. You built this place." I just shrugged. Apparently, that doesn't matter anymore. "What are you going to do?" he asked, genuinely worried. "Go home. Figure things out. Don't worry about me, Daniel. You've got your own situation to manage." He nodded, still looked sick about it. Good kid. Probably next on the chopping block. I handed my badge to security, walked to my car, and sat in the driver's seat for exactly 3 minutes, collecting my thoughts. Then I drove home. My wife, Sarah, was in the kitchen when I walked in. She saw my face before I said anything. "They did it," she said. Not a question. Yep. 30 days. Just business. Don't take it personally. She didn't say anything more. Just came over and hugged me. We stood there for a minute, then she stepped back and looked at me with that expression she gets when she's thinking 3 moves ahead. "What's the plan?" I smiled. The same smile I'd given Robert Sterling. "I'm going to make a phone call." For 22 years, I'd been a senior mechanical engineer at Hartwell Manufacturing. We made industrial packaging equipment, the kind of heavy machinery that fills, seals, and labels products for companies you've definitely heard of. Food, cleaning supplies, pharmaceuticals. If it came in a bottle or a box and rolled off an assembly line somewhere in the Great Plains, there was a decent chance Hartwell equipment touched it. I started there at 32. Hartwell was different. Family-owned for 3 generations, good benefits, a pension plan that actually meant something. The kind of place where you could build a career instead of just collecting paychecks. The Jenkins family had owned Hartwell since 1962. Arthur founded it. His son David expanded it. Eleanor, David's daughter, was running things when I joined in 2002. Good people. They understood that manufacturing success came from keeping skilled workers around. Revolutionary concept these days, apparently. And I did build something there. Not just a career, an actual machine. Back in 2009, Hartwell was struggling. The recession hit manufacturing hard. Our main product line was getting crushed by cheaper overseas competitors. Our old sealing systems were reliable but slow. Clients wanted faster throughput. We couldn't deliver. I remember Eleanor Jenkins, our CEO, in a meeting that February. Orders down 32%. 2 major clients had already moved on. A third was shopping around. If we didn't differentiate ourselves, Hartwell might not survive another 2 years. That night, I went home and started sketching. Not for the company, not officially, just because I couldn't stop thinking about the problem. There had to be a way to increase sealing speed without sacrificing precision. Every existing approach just tried to make mechanisms faster. But faster meant more heat, more wear, more variability. Wrong direction entirely. I spent 18 months in my garage workshop developing a different solution. Nights after dinner when Sarah was watching her shows. Weekends when my buddies were fishing or watching games. Vacation days I never actually took. I designed a rotary sealing mechanism that could process containers 40% faster than anything else on the market, all while maintaining the precision tolerances our clients demanded. The key innovation was a variable pressure cam system that automatically adjusted based on container material. Instead of running the mechanism faster, I made it smarter. Glass bottles, plastic containers, aluminum cans, didn't matter. The system adapted on the fly. Sounds simple now, but at the time, it was genuinely novel engineering. I built 3 prototype iterations before the design stabilized. Burned through about $23,000 of my own money on materials, machining, and testing. Sarah thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I was, but I knew there was something there. Here's the important part, I developed this on my own time, using my own equipment, with my own money. My employment contract at the time had the standard intellectual property clause covering work done during company hours or using company resources. But I was careful. Obsessively careful. Every component was purchased with personal funds from my own checking account. Every hour of development happened outside of work. I kept receipts, time logs, and dated photographs of my garage workshop progress. Even had my neighbor witness and sign some of the documentation. Paranoid? Absolutely. But I'd seen what happened to engineers who invented things on company time. The company owned everything. The inventor got a plaque and maybe a small bonus. I wanted something different if this actually worked. When I brought the concept to Hartwell's leadership in late 2009, they were interested but skeptical. The company was hemorrhaging money. They didn't have capital to invest in unproven technology. Eleanor liked the idea, but her CFO at the time kept shaking his head about development costs. So, I made them a deal. I'd license the patent to Hartwell exclusively for manufacturing and sales. In exchange, I'd receive a 3% royalty on every unit sold that incorporated my sealing mechanism. The agreement was clear, I retained full ownership of the patent. Hartwell got exclusive rights to manufacture and sell, but only as long as the licensing agreement remained active. The lawyers reviewed everything. Both sides signed. Patent number 8,234,567 was registered in my name. The Hartwell RS-400 rotary sealing system launched in 2011. It saved the company. Within 3 years, the RS-400 became Hartwell's flagship product. We went from struggling regional manufacturer to industry leader. Orders came in from across the country, then internationally. Hartwell opened a second production facility just to keep up. The machine I designed in my garage was now generating roughly 40% of total company revenue. My royalty checks were substantial. Not retirement on a yacht money, but enough to pay off my house and build a comfortable cushion. Sarah stopped thinking I was crazy, started thinking I was clever instead. That felt pretty good. More importantly, I was valued. Promoted to senior engineer. Given my own development team. Consulted on every major product decision. When clients came for facility tours, Eleanor always introduced me personally, the guy who saved Hartwell. The guy who built the machine. For 15 years, that's who I was. The company treated me well. I treated them well back. The relationship worked. Then the Jenkins family sold the company. It happened fast. Eleanor was approaching 70 and her children had no interest in manufacturing. Private equity came calling with an offer too good to refuse. A firm out of Dallas with a name that sounded like it was generated by a random word algorithm. By spring of last year, Hartwell Manufacturing was owned by Granite Peak Capital Partners. I knew what private equity meant. Everyone who's worked in manufacturing knows. They buy companies, squeeze out costs, and flip them. The employees who built the value get discarded as operational inefficiencies. But I thought I was safe. I was essential. I held the patent on their most profitable product. My licensing agreement was ironclad. They couldn't touch me. My careful paranoia from 2009? That was supposed to protect me now. Turns out I was half right. The new leadership arrived within weeks of the acquisition. A CEO named Charles Vance, who'd never worked in manufacturing but had an MBA from somewhere impressive and a reputation for aggressive cost reduction. The guy looked like he'd stepped out of a business magazine cover. Perfect suit, perfect haircut, perfect smile that never reached his eyes. His CFO was Robert Sterling, mid-40s, former consulting. Looked at spreadsheets the way a surgeon looks at a patient on the table, identifying what to cut. Every conversation with Robert felt like an efficiency audit. He'd ask about headcount numbers while you were trying to explain technical processes. Completely missed the point every single time. And they brought consultants. A whole team of them, young people in expensive clothes who walked through our facilities with clipboards, asking questions about staffing levels and operational efficiency. Nobody ever explained what they were evaluating. That was the point. Keep everyone nervous. Nervous people don't complain. The first 6 months under Granite Peak ownership were uncomfortable but manageable. Layoffs started in support departments. Brenda from accounting, who'd been there almost as long as me, got a severance package in 2 weeks to clean out her desk. But the engineering division was too valuable to cut carelessly. The RS-400 was still the cash cow. You don't fire the people who understand how the cash cow works. I kept my head down, did my job, collected my royalty checks, and hoped the storm would pass. Then came the pension review. Granite Peak's financial team found that Hartwell's legacy pension plan was significantly underfunded. The Jenkins family had been making up the difference, but that didn't align with Granite Peak's short-term value maximization. Their solution: any employee within 18 months of pension vesting would be offered an early retirement package. Those who declined would be transitioned to a 401k. I was 21 years into my employment. The pension vested at 22 years. 12 months away from locking in benefits I'd been earning for over 2 decades. The numbers weren't small. Full vesting meant about $4,200 per month for life, plus health insurance subsidies. Total lifetime value, somewhere around $1.2 million. 12 months short and I'd get nothing. Lauren Bailey had been my intellectual property attorney since I filed the original patent. She was in her early 60s now, semi-retired, only took cases that interested her. Mine always had. Something about an engineer who'd actually planned ahead for once. Lauren, it's Michael. They just laid me off. I heard her chair creak through the phone. She was probably in her home office. When? Today. Effective in 30 days. 1 year before my pension vests. There was a pause, a long one. I could almost hear her mind working through the implications. Lauren had a particular way of processing problems. Methodical, thorough. The same traits that made her a good patent attorney made her dangerous in negotiations. Michael, she said carefully. Have you reviewed your licensing agreement recently? Not in a few years. Why? Because there's a termination clause. Section 12, paragraph 3. If either party materially breaches the spirit of the business relationship, the other party may terminate the licensing agreement with 30 days written notice. I remembered that clause. We'd included it as protection against Hartwell selling the company to someone who might exploit the technology inappropriately. But I'd always assumed it was theoretical. Lauren continued, a reasonable argument could be made that terminating your employment specifically to avoid pension obligations constitutes a material breach of the business relationship spirit. You developed that technology while working there. They're using it to generate hundreds of millions in revenue. Cutting you loose to save pension costs while continuing to profit from your intellectual property could be seen as acting in bad faith. Would that argument hold up in court? Maybe, maybe not. Courts don't like subjective standards. But here's what would definitely hold up: the licensing agreement requires continued royalty payments. If they've stopped making royalty payments or attempted to invalidate your ownership, that's an unambiguous breach. When was your last payment? December. Q4 came right on schedule. Q1 isn't due until the end of April. Check your employment termination paperwork, Michael. See if there's any language about the licensing agreement. I found the severance package documents Robert had handed me. A folder thick with legalese. Standard release of claims. Non-disparagement. Benefits continuation. I read through the whole thing twice. Found it on page 6. A single paragraph buried in the miscellaneous provisions section. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. Designed to be missed. Employee acknowledges that all intellectual property developed during employment or related to company operations belongs to Hartwell Manufacturing LLC and agrees to assign any outstanding claims to such property as a condition of receiving severance benefits. They were trying to take my patent quietly. Hidden in termination paperwork like a clause nobody would read. Asterisk sign here to get your severance. By the way, everything you invented is now ours. Asterisk Lauren, I said, I think we have a problem. No, Michael. She almost laughed. They have a problem. They just don't know it yet. The next 2 weeks moved fast. Lauren assembled a legal team. I gathered every document related to the original patent development. The receipts for personal purchases. Bank statements. Time logs. Dated photographs. Signed witness statements from my neighbor. The original employment contract from 2002 that predated my patent work and contained no claims to independently developed intellectual property. That paper trail was bulletproof. My paranoia from 15 years ago was about to pay off. Lauren drafted a cease and desist letter. 16 pages of precise legal language. I read through the whole thing with her on a video call. She explained each section. This paragraph establishes your undisputed ownership. This section details the licensing agreement terms. This part addresses the attempted fraudulent assignment in the severance documents. And this final section is the kill shot. What's the kill shot? She read it aloud. Therefore, pursuant to Section 12, Paragraph 3 of the licensing agreement, Michael Patterson hereby terminates said agreement effective immediately due to Hartwell Manufacturing's material breach through attempted fraudulent acquisition of patent rights. Any continued manufacture, sale, or distribution of equipment incorporating U.S. Patent 8,234,567 shall constitute willful patent infringement subject to enhanced statutory damages of up to $150,000 per unit. How many RS400 units did they produce last year? About 800. So if they make even one more unit after receiving this letter, they're potentially liable for $150,000 in damages. If they make 100, that's $15 million. If they keep producing at current rates, they'll bankrupt themselves within a year. Lauren smiled. Exactly. We sent the cease and desist certified mail to Hartwell's corporate headquarters. Copies went to Charles Vance, Robert Sterling, the legal department, the board of directors, and Granite Peak Capital Partners general counsel in Dallas. Then we waited. The first response came 18 hours after delivery confirmation. An email from Hartwell's general counsel to Lauren. Formal, carefully worded, requesting documentation supporting my ownership claims. Standard opening move. Pretend you don't know what you know until you see their cards. Lauren sent everything. The full package. 200 pages of receipts, photographs, contracts, witness statements. Let them see exactly how solid our position was. The second response came 2 days later. My phone rang. Unknown number, Dallas area code. Mr. Patterson, this is legal counsel for Granite Peak Capital Partners. We need to schedule an immediate meeting regarding your recent correspondence. I directed them to Lauren. She scheduled a video conference for the following Monday. Over that weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went fishing. Took my boat out on the lake. Sat there with a line in the water, thinking about nothing in particular. My phone stayed in the car. The fish weren't biting. Didn't matter. I wasn't really there for the fish. Monday morning arrived. The video call included 6 people on their side, 2 Granite Peak lawyers in expensive conference rooms, Hartwell's general counsel looking nervous, Charles Vance looking annoyed, Robert Sterling looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, and someone introduced as a patent litigation specialist they'd retained from a big firm in New York. For $100 an hour minimum for someone like that. Lauren and I were on our side. Just us. Her from her home office, me from my kitchen table. Charles Vance spoke first. Michael, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We have no intention of claiming your patent. That clause in the severance documents was standard boilerplate language. It shouldn't have been included in your specific situation. I didn't respond. Lauren had coached me to stay silent and let them talk. The more they talked, the more they revealed. Robert jumped in, trying to help. We're prepared to remove that language from your severance agreement and honor the original terms. The licensing agreement can continue as structured. There's no need for legal action here. Lauren leaned forward into her camera. Let me make sure I understand. You're acknowledging that Hartwell Manufacturing has no claim to U.S. Patent 8,234,567, that my client retains full ownership, and that the licensing agreement remains the governing document for any use of that technology? Yes, Charles said quickly. Absolutely. This was all a misunderstanding. Good. Then you'll have no objection to signing an amended agreement that explicitly confirms those terms in writing. The lawyers on their side exchanged glances. The patent litigation specialist unmuted himself. His face was carefully neutral. What specific amendments are you proposing? Lauren shared her screen. A document appeared. 23 pages of revised licensing terms. She'd spent the entire weekend preparing this. First, explicit confirmation that Michael Patterson is the sole owner of the patent with no competing claims from Hartwell, Granite Peak, or any affiliated entity. Second, a revised royalty structure reflecting the current market value of the technology. The original 3% was negotiated when the RS400 was unproven. 15 years of market dominance justifies a renegotiation. Third, audit rights allowing my client to verify accurate reporting of units sold. Fourth, a personal guarantee from Granite Peak Capital Partners that royalty obligations will be honored regardless of any future sale, restructuring, or bankruptcy of Hartwell Manufacturing. The silence stretched for a full 15 seconds. I watched Robert Sterling's face go through 3 different shades of red. Those terms are significantly different from the original agreement, one of the Granite Peak lawyers said carefully. The original agreement was negotiated when my client was a valued employee with job security and pension benefits, Lauren replied. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant. Circumstances have changed. My client's leverage has changed accordingly. Robert Sterling finally exploded. This is extortion. You're holding our production line hostage. No, Lauren said. Her tone didn't change at all. This is intellectual property negotiation. My client owns technology that generates 40% of your portfolio company's revenue. You tried to take that technology through a fraudulent assignment clause hidden in severance documents. You terminated my client specifically to avoid pension obligations while continuing to profit from his innovation. If you'd like to discuss extortion, we can add those facts to the public record when we file our patent infringement lawsuit. The patent litigation specialist leaned forward. Let's be careful about characterizations here. Mr. Sterling's comments were expressing frustration, not making legal accusations. My client doesn't care about characterizations, Lauren said. My client cares about fair compensation for his intellectual property. The terms I've outlined are reasonable. The alternative is litigation that will cost you significantly more in legal fees, damages, and lost production time than any royalty increase we're proposing. Charles Vance held up his hand. Let's take a break. We need to discuss this internally. The call ended. Lauren turned to me on the side chat. They'll counter, but they're scared. That litigation specialist they hired bills at least $400 an hour. They wouldn't have brought him in unless they knew they were exposed. What happens now? Now we wait. And while we wait, they have a decision to make. Keep producing RS 400 units and risk $150,000 per unit in damages, or stop production and start losing money every day. They can't fulfill orders. You think they'll stop? Lauren smiled. I think they'll stop within 48 hours. She was right. The counter came 2 days later. They agreed to confirm my patent ownership in writing. They offered a modest increase in the royalty rate from 3% to 4%. They rejected the audit rights and personal guarantee. Lauren rejected their counter. We demanded audit rights, plus back payment of the Q1 royalty they'd been planning to withhold, plus a 7% rate going forward. They came back agreeing to audits with limited scope, but not the guarantee and not 7%. We demanded full audit rights and a personal guarantee covering at least 5 years of obligation. We'd accept 5%. Back and forth, 3 weeks of negotiations, calls and emails, revised documents. During that time, something interesting happened. Hartwell's production lines went quiet. Not officially. Publicly, they announced scheduled maintenance on the RS 400 equipment. Routine upgrades. Nothing to worry about. Orders would be delayed, but fulfilled. But I knew the truth. Lauren had sent a follow-up letter after our first cease and desist. It notified Hartwell that any units produced after the licensing termination date would constitute willful infringement. Each unit carried potential statutory damages. They couldn't risk it. Every RS 400 system they built was a potential lawsuit. So they stopped building them. I heard about it from Daniel, my former colleague, who'd reached out after my termination. Called me on his personal phone after work hours. Michael, the floor is dead. Nothing moving. Management told us it's maintenance, but nobody believes that. The RS 400 line has been dark for 2 weeks. Any word on why? Daniel paused. There's a rumor going around, something about your patent. About you not actually signing it over to the company. Is that true? I didn't confirm or deny. Just told Daniel to keep his head down and not repeat anything he'd heard. 3 weeks of zero production on their flagship product. Customer orders piling up, delivery commitments being missed, competitors circling like sharks who smelled blood in the water. I heard through industry contacts that 2 major accounts had already started conversations with other vendors. The phone calls from Granite Peak partners to Charles Vance were reportedly getting more frequent, more urgent, more angry. They'd bought Hartwell expecting a reliable cash flow from the RS400. Instead, they were watching their investment deteriorate by the day. The final agreement came together on a Thursday afternoon. Lauren called me with the details. Her voice was satisfied. They capitulated, she said. Full ownership confirmation with no competing claims. Royalty rate increased from 3% to 7%, retroactive to the acquisition date. Quarterly audit rights with independent verification. Personal guarantee from Granite Peak covering all obligations for the next 7 years. And one more thing. What? Full pension vesting. They're going to reinstate your employment for the remaining 12 months, then allow you to retire with complete benefits as originally structured. You'll be on paid administrative leave during that period. No actual work required. I sat down hard on my couch. They gave me everything. They didn't have a choice, Michael. 3 weeks of shutdown cost them more than your pension is worth. Customer relationships were deteriorating. Their projected revenue for the quarter was shot. Granite Peak's investment thesis for Hartwell Manufacturing depended on the RS400 revenue stream. Without your patent, that investment is worthless. They ran the numbers. Paying you was cheaper than fighting you. So, they paid. The reinstatement paperwork arrived the following week. A formal letter from Charles Vance acknowledging that my termination had been processed in error due to miscommunication between divisions and that I remained an employee in good standing with all benefits intact. The letter was nonsense, of course. Everyone knew what had actually happened, but it gave them cover to reverse course without admitting wrongdoing. Let them have their face-saving language. I had what I wanted. I signed the amended licensing agreement. Lauren filed the necessary documents. The personal guarantee from Granite Peak was recorded. Everything buttoned up. Hartwell's production line started running again within 48 hours. I heard they brought in weekend shifts to try to catch up. Some of the delayed orders were filled at cost just to keep customers from leaving. Over the next year, I collected my salary without working, watching from a distance as Granite Peak struggled with the consequences of their own greed. The RS400 delays had damaged customer relationships that took months to rebuild. 2 of Hartwell's senior engineers quit after seeing how they'd treated me. They reached out privately, asked me for references. I gave them good ones. The company's reputation in the industry had taken a hit. Word gets around. People talk at trade shows. The story of the engineer who owned his own patent and shut down production became something of a legend in manufacturing circles. Granite Peak didn't like that story being told. Nothing they could do about it. My royalty checks arrived quarterly. 7% instead of 3%. More than double what I'd been making. The audit reports showed accurate unit counts for the first time since I couldn't remember when. Turns out they'd been underreporting sales by about 15% for years. That discrepancy alone added nearly $80,000 in back payments. On the anniversary of my original termination date, I officially retired. Full pension, full benefits. A small ceremony in the Hartwell conference room where Charles Vance shook my hand and thanked me for my contributions with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I shook back. Smiled the same smile I'd given Robert Sterling a year earlier when he told me it was just business. Just business, I said. Don't take it personally. He didn't laugh. Sarah was waiting in the parking lot. We drove to our favorite restaurant for lunch, ordered the most expensive thing on the menu because we could. She raised her glass across the table. To patience, she said. To paranoia, I replied. Same thing sometimes. She laughed. 22 years of watching you organize receipts finally paid off. It really did. 6 months after my retirement, Granite Peak sold Hartwell Manufacturing to a larger industrial conglomerate. The sale price was reportedly 20% lower than their original projections due to customer attrition and competitive pressure during the shutdown period. The RS400 remained the company's top product, but the damage from those 3 weeks had lasting effects. My licensing agreement transferred to the new owners automatically. The personal guarantee from Granite Peak remained in effect for the full 7 years regardless of the sale. The royalty checks kept coming like clockwork. I got a call from Lauren a few weeks after the sale closed. Just had an interesting conversation with the new ownership's legal team, she said. They wanted to understand the licensing terms before they finalized the acquisition. What did you tell them? The truth. That you own a patent generating 40% of their newly acquired revenue stream. That the licensing agreement is ironclad. That any attempt to modify terms without your consent would result in immediate termination and production shutdown. How did they take it? Better than Granite Peak did. The new general counsel actually complimented the contract structure. Said it was some of the cleanest IP licensing he'd ever seen. Asked if you'd be interested in consulting on future development. I laughed. Consulting? Apparently your reputation precedes you. The engineer who outmaneuvered a private equity firm. They think you might have useful perspective. Funny how that works. Last month, I got an official letter from Hartwell's new engineering director. They were developing an upgraded version of the RS400 and wanted to know if I'd be interested in consulting. Market rates, plus a bonus for any patentable improvements. I wrote back with one condition: any new patents developed during the engagement would remain my property, licensed to Hartwell under terms I'd negotiate separately. They agreed immediately. My first consulting session was 2 weeks ago. Flew me out to the facility, put me up in a nice hotel. The new engineering team had already started on some promising concepts, but hit a wall with a thermal management system. Same problem I'd solved 15 years ago with a different approach. Took me about 4 hours to sketch out a solution. They looked at me like I'd performed a magic trick. The team lead, a guy named Sam, who'd been hired after the acquisition, pulled me aside after the session. Said he'd heard stories about what happened with Granite Peak, said everyone in the industry had heard, asked if the rumors were true. I told him the rumors were probably conservative. He laughed. Said it was nice to finally meet the guy who taught private equity a lesson about reading contracts. Second session is next month. They're already talking about a retainer arrangement. So, here's the final scorecard. Pension, $1.2 million in lifetime benefits. Fully vested. Checks arrive on the 1st of every month. Royalty rate increased from 3% to 7%. That's an extra $180,000 per year compared to what I was making before. Back payments from audit discrepancies, $80,000. Legal fees, $45,000. Worth every penny. Consulting income, $4,800 for that first session alone. More coming. Total cost to Granite Peak for trying to steal my patent, 3 weeks of production shutdown. Customer attrition that dropped their sale price by 20%. Legal fees north of $100,000. Robert Sterling's career. For months after the Hartwell sale closed, Granite Peak let him go. Official reason was restructuring. Real reason was that the Hartwell situation became a case study in what not to do. His position became untenable overnight. Last I heard, he was working at a smaller firm in Indianapolis. Significant step down. Someone who knew him said he'd become very careful about reviewing termination documents. Charles Vance landed at another private equity portfolio company 6 weeks after Hartwell sold. Similar role, different industry. Some people fail upward. Daniel, my former colleague who'd kept me informed during the shutdown, got promoted to lead the engineering team after 2 of the senior guys quit. He called me last week to say thanks for the reference I'd given him years ago. Said the new ownership was actually listening to the engineers for once. The patent litigation specialist Granite Peak hired never did any litigation. Billed them $28,000 for 3 weeks of meetings and analysis. Add it to the list. Sarah and I booked a trip to Spain for next spring. First real vacation in probably 15 years. We're using the back payment money. Seemed fitting. The workshop in my garage is still running. Got a new project going that has nothing to do with sealing mechanisms. Just something interesting. No corporate entanglements. Just me and the problem. They said it was just business. Turns out I'm pretty good at business. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to use someone else's tactics against them?